I am very privileged today to introduce Sue Ryan. She wrote an article which was recently published in Authority magazine titled Lessons Learned as a Caregiver. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Sue. What was life like before you became a caregiver?
My life as before I was a caregiver actually was in my early 20s. I had my very first role of being a family caregiver that far ago, although you might think it was only about 10 years ago. It was actually a little longer. At any rate, before I became a caregiver, it really was more carefree. I was more focused on me, and I didn't think through the lens of other people first, primarily. And that all shifted when I became a caregiver.
You can't just think about yourself anymore and be a caregiver. How did caregiving begin for you at that very young age?
It began with a loved one. It was not it wasn't my parents. I've had my dad and my grandmother and my husband have been several of my closest family members, but this was a loved one. And she was showing symptoms of dementia and hadn't yet been diagnosed, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And we would try something, and one day it would work, and the next day it wouldn't. And then we try something else, and it was like I say, being on a roller coaster, an emotional roller coaster, often blindfolded. We just didn't know what to do, and it was frightening. It
Mhm.
was frustrating. She was such a wonderful, dear, dear, dear person, and we wanted her not to be struggling, and we couldn't fix it. When we didn't know what to do and we didn't have anyone who could share anything with us, nobody knew how to give us information, people didn't talk about it. So it was really, really frustrating and overwhelming, and there were times when it was frightening.
We humans really like predictability, and a diagnosis like this just throws a huge bucket of unpredictability into your lives. How did it change you?
I have always been a very other-directed person. It has always been a part of the way I was wired to be empathetic and to care about others. What I recognized in that was not only the emotion of empathy, but the responsibility of empathy, is that I wasn't a parent, so I didn't know about being responsible for a child, and yet I felt responsible for the health and well-being of this person, in addition to wanting them not to be in pain and having the frustration of not knowing what to do. And it created a tremendous amount of burden of responsibility on me that I hadn't really ever experienced in that way before.
Not many early 20s will have had an experience of that heavy a responsibility. Were you in the middle of college or had you completed college? What was your normal life?
My day job. My day job was in the technology industry. I was working with computer science and I was working with financial based applications. So I was traveling quite a bit as well. And that added another layer of responsibility of making sure there was care, continuous care, and that I could be available when I needed to be and could be accessed. It also added another burden because it wasn't a season where businesses embraced people who were family caregivers, so I couldn't self-identify to anyone at work. And
Oh,
that added another level of complexity to what it was. And yet, what I also learned a lot about myself, and I talked to so many caregivers who've learned this, we have a strength and a depth of capacity that we haven't needed to switch on often before we have become caregivers. And I had access to something I had never known I had access to before.
a part of yourself that until then had remained hidden to you, would you say?
Yeah, I just had never really needed to access that before. And I was comforted to realize that the way I was naturally wired supported me being able to feel like, okay, I can do this. It may feel overwhelming and I'm frightened, and yet I didn't run from it. I said, I can do this. I can figure it out. There's a way to figure it out. So I was learning about myself in a meaningful way as well along the journey.
To not be able to share the journey with the people around you must have been very isolating.
It's a
Did you?
perfect word for it. Perfect word. It's isolating. It is it's it adds so much more work that's unnecessary. It added layer after layer after layer of things that just didn't have to be, because I couldn't tell my coworkers, I couldn't tell the company, and I had to make sure that other people didn't know this is part of what was going on, because I had already seen modeled for me when other people had shared that it hadn't been very good for them professionally. Also, being early in my career and knowing what I wanted my career path to be, I wouldn't have been given the opportunities I was if they were saying, oh no, she can't do that because she needs to stay at home. And those were things that I'm so passionate now about trying to eliminate in the workplace, so that it's as easy to say, I'm taking my son to the doctor as I'm taking my mom to the doctor.
Yes. In the early years of caregiving, you mentioned in the article that you spent a great deal of time and energy fighting the reality of what was. Can you describe what that was like? And did you ever get to the place where reality was something you accepted?
Yes, it was a huge transformation in my life. In the beginning, I used the example with my dad as a really great one. My dad, my whole life, my dad focused on two primary lessons. I want to teach you how to think so you'll know what to do when I'm not here. And I've said I just never thought that was when he was still alive, because as he developed dementia, the dad I knew was no longer there. And the other thing he said is, I want to teach you how to be safe so you'll know what to do. With him, there was a really pivotal experience where I knew he had dementia. He'd had it for several years. By the time my dad got diagnosed, I'd been on multiple journeys before that with other loved ones. So that wasn't my first time. However, my dad and I were so close, it was really hard for me to grasp, to let go of the past, that he'd always known this, he'd always done this. And it was also very hard not to fortune tell into the future. And we had a particular experience where I tried to get him to do something because it had been what he'd always done, and he absolutely had no access to it. And I realized afterward I had really underserved him. I didn't meet him exactly where he was. And that changed my whole life. It's changed the way I live every part of my life now. And I call it massive acceptance and radical presence. What I learned in that experience is that I had accepted, but not 100%, exactly where he was. So now what I talk about is, you accept things exactly the way they are. I don't have to like it. I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to understand it in the moment. I just have to accept it, and accept it without judgment of myself, of anyone else, or of the situation. And when I can do that, when I can stay in that place of, okay, this is what it is, then I have access to be so fully present, I can meet them exactly where they're at. I'm not thinking about what they used to have access to. I'm not thinking what they could do this morning. And I'm not fortune telling, well, it could be this or this or this or this. It's no, what do we have in the moment? So when I'm fully present, what I learned, and it has changed so much the way that I was with my dad and then with my husband, is that I could make the really wise choices no matter what, no matter how challenging they were. And some of them were incredibly challenging. And yet I could also see beauty. Nancy, I could see so much beauty in even the tiniest little moment. And that made the journey so much better. And I think that is one of the most pivotal things for me in my life, that I also want other caregivers to have access to, because so many of them are judging themselves, they're judging the situation, they're wishing it wasn't the way it is, they're wanting it to be the way it was, they're trying to get their loved one to be the way they were and they're not, and all of those things. And that doesn't do us any good.
Yeah. And it doesn't help the one we're caring for at all.
No.
You know, what you're describing and what I'm thinking is, it sounds like a spiritual path, a spiritual journey, to have come to those lessons and to have embraced them so thoroughly. Would you call it that?
Yes, I would call it that. In my life, I did go on a spiritual journey to learn about acceptance and presence. And when you are taught something, you learn it and you hear it at one level. Then when it intersects with a life experience, it comes to life in you. And that was exactly what happened to me, is that some of the people who I had studied and from a spiritual perspective about acceptance,
Mhm.
when this experience happened with my dad, it just clicked. It just clicked that that's what it really meant. And it has made the rest of my life so much more peaceful.
So you had a mental construct for what acceptance meant. You may
Yes.
have been able to describe it, but when it intersected with the reality of your life, then it became a definite spiritual practice for you.
It has, and it's remained that. And here's the thing that's even more important that I would say. Yes, it was wonderful for me, and it is wonderful for me on a day in and day out basis. I promise you, if it was great for me, it was so much better for any experience I had with my care receivers, because when I met them where they were at, it diminished their anxiety. When I accepted where they were, my whole energy was different. I could have a smiling face with them. I could be right in with them in their moment where they were at. And sometimes they were frightened. And I could soften that for them. I could be there with them. And the magnitude of what it was secondary to being fully present in the moment with them where they were, and allowing them to have that moment and move through that moment instead of being stuck in the moment because they didn't have a path.
You've eliminated judgment not only of yourself, but of the person you're caring for, so that the pressure is off of both of you.
And the diagnosis. So many people that I've met, I've been blessed in my life. I never resented and I never said, "Oh, why me?" So I didn't resent the diagnosis. I didn't resent what all of those things. I accepted all of those kinds of things. And yet I have seen so many people who are angry at the diagnosis.
Right.
And that's the energy that they have when they're with their loved one. They're frustrated by the diagnosis, they're frustrated with what's being taken away from their lives, and that carries forward. This just allows you not to waste any energy on any of that.
Gosh, I love what you're describing, and to some degree, maybe not as profound a degree as you, but to some degree, I've been learning those same lessons in my journey. Would you would you characterize this life that you've had as being called to this particular role of caregiver in for certain loved ones? And you even mentioned your husband, and now you're turning it into a way of helping and supporting perhaps thousands of others who are on the same journey. It almost sounds like you were called to this life.
When I was in my journeys, what I recognized is the beginning journeys, the first ones when you don't know what it is, you don't know. You don't know the questions to ask, you don't know what to do, you don't know anything. And I said, I don't ever want anybody to have to struggle the way I struggled. I had that clarity from the very beginning, not the connection of it with a purpose or anything like that. Then, as caregiving kept becoming a role that was intersecting with my life, I recognized that it wouldn't keep coming into my life if there wasn't something greater than just that as the experience. And when I say just, I don't diminish that what that is. However, it kept coming into my life. Professionally, and personally, I've always been a passionate communicator. I love to write, I love to speak, I love to share, I love to help coach people and guide people. So the intersection of this particular part of my life and what I'm passionate about doing coming together helped me recognize that I can use the gifts that I was given of communication and my passion to help other people through the lens of the specificity of what this example was coming into my life over and over and over again, so that other people's lives can be easier than the experience that I had. And it's interesting because as I stepped into that, calling or purpose, whatever you want to say, it's like it revealed itself to me one day that kind of not like hitting me over the head, but recognizing how peaceful it was to be doing this, and that it also gave purpose, more purpose to the journeys my loved ones have been on, all of the people who have helped, the lessons I've learned from them, all the other pieces of it came together so that it now can live on in a way that, as opposed to being something that brings you sadness can now support others in helping them.
I think there's so much comfort in seeing purpose in the pain that we've experienced in our lives, being able to share our wisdom, whatever wisdom has been gained, with others, makes it a much bigger purpose than just taking care of one person for a period of time.
I think it does. And the other part of the peaceful part of this, Nancy, and I know you've experienced this as well, because you do so much I mean, you're one of my role models. You do so much in the community to support people having the messages. As you and I both know, we all see this differently. There are some people who they manage with their caregivers differently. They have different emotions. We're wired differently to view the world differently. I'm not saying that the way that it's come for me is the way that it's going to be for everyone. I respect that there are some people who will stay very deeply saddened in their heart and will be angry with it. And that's the way that they are. And that's their choice. And that's where everyone has the opportunity to be. I have felt the calling to make sure that people understand that there is the capacity to have this lens if they wanted to choose this to be their direction. I don't want people not to know it's possible. And I also don't want them to struggle finding answers the way I did. My business partner, Nancy, and I have both struggled so much to find some of the answers. And we just don't want people to have to work that hard at it. We want, it's like, okay, why do you do?
I certainly admire that. And I love the quote, and you already mentioned it once, but I'm going to bring it up again. Quote, guilt is a wasted emotion that adds no value. I
Nope.
chose to feel positive about what I had the capacity to do, find support where I didn't, and not judge myself or anyone else when I chose getting extra support. I love that quote. Is there anything at all you'd like to add, or even an anecdote about it?
Yes, I have. When I'm talking to people, I have some things I say. I'll say, guilt is a wasted emotion that sucks energy out of the universe and adds no value. And the reason for that is that what I've learned in my life from so many other people and from my own personal experiences, grief, guilt is modeled, like grief is modeled for us, guilt is modeled for us. Guilt is modeled for us. So we don't, I'll be speaking and I'll say, raise your hand if you've ever looked up the word guilt in the dictionary. And nobody raises their hand. So they take on the emotion of guilt when that's not really the emotion they're feeling. And they'll say, I feel so guilty. And they put a period after it. So they're using it as a label. I feel guilty. They don't really have their own definition of it. And then they're not doing anything about it. And so it just drains them because they stay in that. Well, you can't process an emotion if you're not using the right emotion. So I invite them to say, well, let's look at the dictionary definition of the word guilt. And it means you've really done something bad, punishable by law, when actually probably what it is you feel sad. For
Yes.
example, somebody says, would you like to go to lunch? And your loved one is at home. Oh, I feel so guilty. I can't leave them at home. I don't want to let them, they can't go to lunch and I don't want them to have to feel like they're being left out. Is guilt really the right emotion? Or is it, I feel sad, and yet what I'm going to do is I understand that my loved one, I can put them in an environment based on where they're at, where they could be having a joy-filled time. They could be having a better time. I can bring somebody in to share time with them, and then I can practice self-care by going to lunch with my friends. So you're in integrity with yourself, and you're making a better choice. And so I want people to know that when you say something like, I feel guilty, or I'm so worried. Worry's another one. I'm so worried, and they put a period after it, and they don't do anything about it. It's take the period away, put a comma, and do something about it so that you're taking action and processing it, and then you can move forward.
I was so fortunate that when my son was terminal and living with us, I was also working on my master's degree.
Oh, bless you.
The assignment was to do a self-counseling every month that was a dialogue between my human self and my higher power, however I described that. And I decided to do my self-counseling on worry because I was so full of anxiety every day, just fighting anxiety. And I recognized in the self-counseling the instructions, the the learning I got from my higher power was that I believed that worry was an act of love. And when I got clear that worry is not an act of love, in fact, one of the definitions I've heard since then is worry is sending negative energy to my loved one. And I don't want to send negative energy to my loved one. It helped, and there were some other things that were accomplished during that self-counseling, but it helped me probably diminish my anxiety by 75% at least. Just recognizing it's not loving to worry about my son 24 hours a day.
Well, the energy around it, what a beautiful thing to share. That's really powerful because I don't think people necessarily think about that. When you're in the state of worry, you are putting out the energy of worry and angst, and it shows on your face. You can hear it in your voice. It's in your actions. And yet, when you're worried, you say, "I'm so worried," but then you're not doing anything. And
Right.
it is one of the things that I've also learned is that we have so many unconscious reactions. So worry is something that we've learned from other people. Guilt is something we've learned from other people. And that it's unconscious that we automatically, I should worry about that. Or I should, but then because it's really not the right emotion, you don't know what to do. You're not really doing anything. We're at choice. When we move ourselves to choice, and this was a big part of my decision with the acceptance and presence, is I am at choice. I choose. Just like when you had the awakening of that, you chose not to be in a state of worry, but in a state of what am I going to do about this? Because worry isn't an action state. You're not
Yes.
doing anything. So what a powerful thing. And it probably showed in the way that your son interacted with you.
Yes. Well, it certainly showed in the up-leveling of my energy. In fact, part of that assignment was also to write an affirmation. And we had a guided meditation during this classroom that weekend. And during the meditation, I saw myself walking on the beach, and there was a treasure chest that was partially exposed. And I stopped and opened it, and the gift in the treasure chest was peace.
Oh,
God told me very clearly, we have a gift exchange. You give me your trust, I give you my peace. And so my affirmation for my son and myself that I still have on my desk today is I am walking in peace, trusting the path to unfold. Not only my path, but the path for my son. And some days I must have repeated that affirmation 100 times, you know,
yes.
to pull myself out of anxiety. But gosh, what a gift that was. What an awareness. It changed my life forever.
It would have been such a beautiful thing for you. And then once you've got the awakening of that, you never go back. And it just continues to give you permission. And that's one of the beautiful things about something like that, where you see the potential and possibilities, is now you have permission to explore. You're not
Yeah.
going in that should kind of energy. I should be this, or I should be that, or I shouldn't feel good because they don't feel good, or I shouldn't do this. It's you take yourself into the place of choice, and what you recognizing that you were doing by actually honoring what God had given you as the gift in your life. It's not the absence of experiences we have that break our heart. It's the fact that, we learn how much we can love and how deeply we can love and how we use those in our lives. It, I don't ever diminish the emotion of the experience.
Yeah.
I choose the application of it in my life.
It didn't eliminate grief, but
Nope.
grief is different than guilt. Grief is different than worry or anxiety. When I interviewed your partner, Nancy Treaster, she said there are over 55 million people living with dementia worldwide.
Yes.
That's an astounding number. So, is your podcast reaching at least some of those people with the kind of
Yes.
support that you can offer.
We do our podcast. We're really proud of what we've been doing. We've created our podcast to be geared toward a global audience. We have some of the messages are very specific to either the United States or to something. For example, when we talk about some of the things in caregiving, and we'll talk about a in the United States, they call it Medicare, and what they call it in other countries. We have New Zealand, South Africa, we've got Great Britain. We've got other countries in the world in addition to the United States that are listening to the messages and people seeking the content out. And what we really like about the platform, our choice, and it came from our journeys, we are very firm on really practical tips and having very candid conversations about the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we know what it's like not to find the answer. If you're a dementia family caregiver, it doesn't matter what country you live in.
Right.
It doesn't matter where you are. You're still struggling with these challenges, and we bring solutions. They may have to go through Google Translate and they may have a different language, but the purpose of them is to impact that. The numbers, and I won't even get into the statistics of it, but the numbers are growing exponentially with people being diagnosed with different types of dementia right now. And so this isn't a diagnosis that is going to be diminishing in the near term. It's actually escalating in its numbers, and the numbers are also gearing toward younger and younger people.
Nancy shared with me that the World Health Organization believes the numbers will be 139 million by 2050, just 25 years from now. That is just astounding. And I wonder how much research is going into what is causing the upgrowth in the numbers of dementia and what can we do to prevent it.
There's a lot more research that is being done. It's an exciting time. Just like doctors are really prioritizing different kinds of cancers and finding cures for that, and more than just the cure, but the prevention. So, for example, how do you prevent it? And there are a lot of resources. We share them on our podcast and the website. It's very easy to find. There are a lot of things that we can do lifestyle-wise that you would to prevent any other kind of a diagnosis. Some of the causes include the genetics, the healthy lifestyle, not having a lot of sugar, getting a lot of exercise, getting plenty of sleep, having mental stimulation, taking care of yourself. Those are things that are helpful for all different, reductions of diagnoses. And yet there are certain kinds of triggers for it, and they can tend to be the lifestyle ones with things that we consume. But for the other part of it, it's genetics, and they still don't know. So we don't have an absolute way to have a vaccine for it. They have made some very exciting breakthroughs they're working on. But before we get there, our numbers are going to be escalating. And that's one of the things that all areas of our world need to be prepared for, because we have so many of us are working, and we've added the role of caregiver on top of being parent and sibling and all of the other roles we have. And those just aren't going away. And the costs of medical care are increasing, and the costs of housing as our loved ones get older. And some of the other pieces of that where we talk about the sandwich generations, that phrase, I'm sure you've used that before, and it's people being sandwiched in the middle. There's so many more people now sandwiched in the middle because, for example, in the United States, the fastest growing group in the United States is people 85 years and older.
Yes.
So you're caring for your own current and future needs. You're maybe caring for your parents as well and some of the financial opportunities for them. And now you've potentially also got your grandparents. So,
Yeah.
and then you've got your adult children and their children. And so a lot of different considerations now, because there aren't cures yet for the diagnosis, and it is continuing to grow exponentially.
One of your biggest pieces of advice is that being a caregiver of a dementia diagnosis is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yep.
that you must prioritize self-care. So how did you prioritize self-care while you were in the middle of learning all you had to learn about being a caregiver?
Sure. I actually learned about prioritizing self-care because I didn't.
Okay, that's a good
And
place to
and
begin.
well, I'm hardworking. I'm doing all these things. I got to do a little bit more of this. I shave off a little bit of self-care. I don't have to go to the gym every single morning. Shave that off a little bit. With my husband, for example, he was doing the finances, and as that capability diminished, after he would go to bed, I would fix them. So I shave off a little bit of sleep at night, and you continue to shave off a little of that. And then one day, as simple as this sounds, Nancy, I had fed him his lunch and he dropped a potato chip, and I nearly flipped out. And my
Hmm.
inside, fortunately, they had grace of space. It didn't come on the outside, but the inside is, seriously, I've been working hard for you all day, and you drop a potato chip on the floor. You can't even be more careful. And that's something I would never in my life even say. That's not who I am. And I recognized I had not been practicing self care. And what I also recognized is I didn't have an accountability partner. I had gotten together teams of people that would help if my husband needed care for 5 or 10 minutes or 20 minutes and I couldn't be there, blah, 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 blah. I had all that in place. I didn't have anybody that was holding me accountable for care. And so I fortunately, and I know people who've been in the hospital and had all different kinds of really serious issues because they didn't. I was
Hmm.
fortunate that I got a potato chip wake up call. I then started prioritizing my own self care, and I got an accountability partner to help me because I knew I was not strong enough to do it on my own. And I have continued to look at it through the lens of if we don't take care of ourselves, we cannot take care of someone else because we don't have capacity. And I flipped on it. I used to think it was, an extra thing to take care of myself. No, I have no extra if I'm not caring for myself. And so I think, to raising this part of our conversation to share with other people is that we can't be who we're meant to be if we're not caring for ourselves to be who we're meant to be.
Yes. I'm thinking of a day when I was caring for my terminally ill son at home and running couple, several times a week to my parents' house to care for my mother, who needed someone to be there when she showered, and I would take food to her and so forth. And I was on my way home, and I didn't realize I was speeding, and I saw the cops, light in my rearview mirror. And I thought, shall I tell him what I'm going through? And I just put my head down on the steering wheel and thought, it's too much, it takes too much effort to even explain. Just give me the ticket and let me go. And that was one of the wake up calls I got, that I was stretching myself too thin without giving things to me that restored my energy or that helped to save energy for me.
Yes, and it's easier for us to look at others and see it for other people like you've got to do this, you got to do this. And for us, we are compassionate people, we want to help other people. Well, we'll do a little bit less for ourselves so we can help others, and we feel like we're doing the right thing, we're being generous to them, we're being kind to them, we're being helpful, we're doing the right thing. When we kind of get skewed in that and forget that, we have to preserve and reserve some of ourselves so that we have capacity when they need us more. And as their diagnosis continues to advance, they need more of us even than they did in the beginning. And if we haven't gotten it figured out, it's not something you can do in 5 minutes. It doesn't reverse itself. If you haven't been doing it, it's not like you fill up a glass of water and now you got water.
I love the idea of having an accountability partner.
Yes.
My husband was somewhat of an accountability partner because there were certain things he insisted that I take time for. And, times that we spent together, we'd go out to breakfast, and I was fortunate that I was able to do that. But I just think having an accountability partner must be a lifesaver.
That's the right word for it, Nancy. It really is the right word for it. And it's somebody who gets you. It's somebody who knows who you are, They know how you would lie to yourself. They know how you would lie to them. And it's really not that you're not necessarily intending. You feel like you're doing the right thing by going, I'm fine. But
Yeah.
one of our rules is you can never say I'm fine.
I love that rule. I'm
Yeah.
fine is the most often quoted lie in our culture.
Yeah, you're not fine. You can say, today I feel this. So I had to write, I made myself. I mean, I created the rules and she she modified them. But I literally had to say, this is how I am feeling today. This is what I'm frustrated with. This is what, so I literally had to say out loud what was going on and walk through a litany of different things so that I could recognize and we could together then say, okay, now what are we going to do about it? And it was never, what are you going to do about it? It was, what are we going to do about it?
What a
So
gift.
that she was there to support me in that. And having that, it's amazing that it's, yes, it's that person you can be talking with. It's also, yes, that person is there. Periodically through our journey, and I'm sure you experienced this, we don't have a reference reservoir of things we haven't had, especially in our early caregiving journeys. We've never had this happen to us. We don't know how we're going to feel. We don't know when grief, I talk about drip grief, that like I knew the last night my husband and I were going to stand down with our feet in the water on the beach holding hands. I knew this was the last time. That's drip grief. It's a little bit going away, a little bit going away, a little bit going away at a time. So we're kind of grieving along the way. And yet every once in a while it hits you. And I mean, I would just sob. I was like my insides were trying to come out. And I would call and say, I have no idea where this came from. And yet my heart hurts. I mean, I am so, and then to be able to know I had someone to share that with,
Yes.
it allows you to be in the moment of it, but not be locked in what it is and not know what to do with it or how to get out of it.
It's almost magical how profound it is to have one person in our life who sees us and knows us, that we can't fib to,
Yep.
and is there to support. It is so comforting, deeply, deeply comforting.
It is deeply comforting. I also have learned an exercise, and I call it talking to my mom, is that theoretically we know, like I knew I shouldn't be shaving off the things I was shaving off. The core of me, I knew it. And I'll do the thing where I'll say, all right, I don't think I'll do this. And this is my mom. Seriously? Well, you know that this is what it could be. So I'm doing like sock puppets to each other for people who are listening to this instead of seeing it. I've got my hands like two different sock puppets, and I'm having a conversation with myself. And I'm doing it out loud so that it's not like I'm just pretending, but really it's having that conversation and you can hear it. So in the absence of having an accountability partner with you, just have the conversation out loud and you hear yourself speaking. You realize, okay, I need to do something different.
Yes. I remember the day, my adult son was not very easy to live with. And I remember feeling a lot of resentment toward him. And I thought, how can I be resenting him when I know he doesn't have long to live? And it was because I wasn't setting good boundaries for myself. And resentment is the outcome
Wow.
of poor boundaries. And once I began setting some reasonable boundaries with clear consequences, the resentment just vanished because I was taking care of myself while I was also taking care of him.
That is so insightful to have that and gives you peace of mind. I had learned in complement to what it is resentments are unmet expectations. If we
Yes,
resent something, but they don't know that we're resenting it, then they can't do something different.
right.
And I had learned that there were times that I hadn't set to your exact point. If I don't set a boundary that someone else knows about, how can I be resentful of the fact that they are not honoring my boundary?
Exactly.
They don't know. So here I am, I'm upset or angry or frustrated, and they've got no clue.
Right.
So yeah, but I like the way that you talk about it with boundaries. I think that's really, really powerful.
Well, several years later, I ended up writing a book about it, about appropriate, healthy boundary setting.
Good
It's
for you.
called Pungent Boundaries. And
Ooh,
I use the term pungent because Boundary setting is not easy work. It's tough
No.
work. It's kind of sticky and messy and sometimes loud, but appropriate, healthy boundaries give both me and the other person freedom.
That's a really good way of saying it. And that really is a lot of what it is. It's the freedom because we don't, we don't prefer, would we have preferred that this was our journey? Everybody has journeys they're on in their lives, and all of our journeys have part of the texture of them is that they're going to be challenging times. And so each of us are challenged in different ways. However, when we put ourselves in that right position and you've got the freedom
Yes,
to go with it
yes.
because you've created the healthy boundaries and you can be in it. And then it also allows you to not feel inappropriate emotions toward an emotion you're having. I've talked to so many people who say, I feel guilty feeling sad. I shouldn't feel sad because they're you started to the thing about with your son. Well, I shouldn't resent him because he doesn't have long to live. Well, okay. Why don't you just like own your own emotion and what are your feelings and how do you feel about this and what can you do about it and have that and give yourself permission to have them and explore them and honor them and then do something with them.
Well, it was a life-changing day for me when I stood outside his bedroom door and realized that the reason I was feeling resentful because he would not change. I knew he wasn't going to change. So if I wanted things to get better, I had to be the one that changed. And that led to the journey of setting some very appropriate boundaries that gave us both a lot more freedom to just love each other without resentment.
That had to take a lot of courage, Nancy, on your part, strength and courage. It would be easy for you just to say, well, no, I'm just going to go ahead and I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to do anything with it. And yet what it did is it allowed you to have a better relationship.
It did. We ended up having many very, very precious conversations before he finally passed that I treasure to this day.
Mm.
I have so much respect for the what you and your business partner Nancy have turned your experiences and your wisdom into. The website for those of you who are listening is caregiversjourney.com. And I'm sure on the website they can enroll in or get notice of the podcast that you are putting out. How often do you promote or
We,
have a
we, yes, we put out a new podcast every 2 weeks.
okay?
And we've got all of the podcasts listed there on all the top podcast places you can have. They're also on YouTube. And one of the things that we're getting ready to launch now is a newsletter. And we're going to be we created a nonprofit because our focus is really just to be helping people. So we're creating guides and worksheets and workbooks and things that we're going to be combining with our podcast episodes to give to people on a complimentary basis. And so we're going to also put together a newsletter, which we hadn't done in the beginning. We wanted to really focus on getting into the rhythm of the right way of doing the podcasts. And now we feel we're ready to take these two steps to provide an extra layer of support with our listeners. So soon there's going to be a button on the website where they can be downloading and starting to get the newsletter if they chose to.
Well, you've got an awesome array of resources to support those who are caregivers, particularly, I would say caregivers in any circumstance, but yours is particularly targeting those that are caregiving to loved ones who have dementia, which is a very unique, what's the word I want to, genre is the word I'm looking for.
Well, we wanted to make sure, and the reason that we did this for several reasons. One is this is where the depth of our experience is. The other one is that when we were looking for answers, I respect that somebody has heart challenges and they're caregiving someone who's got heart challenges. I want them to know that when they come to our website, or when they're looking and this is dementia, this is not for a heart disease, or this is not for something else. So we wanted to make it very, very easy for people to know that we were the right place to come to or not to come to. So we niched it to dementia family caregivers. And so everything that we've got, the book, the online course, the workbook shops that we're doing, and anything that we do is all in. And dementia is the umbrella for a variety of different diagnoses. So there are no shortage of different symptomatically ways that that represents itself and ways to care and support.
I so appreciate the time you've shared with me today, Sue, and so appreciate what you've shared about your personal journey, the different parts of it that have added up to this, where you are now with caregiversjourney.com and all that you and Nancy are doing. Thank you so
Nancy,
much.
right back at you because of all of the things you're doing in the community and all of the things you're doing for caregivers worldwide, and that you have, and the vulnerability you have in sharing your stories so that other people can see themselves in that and realize they're not alone. And one of the things that Nancy and I end every one of our podcast episodes with is we're all on this journey together.
Yes, we certainly are.